What chance of an upset in what is effectively a one-horse race in Russia? While there are other starters, Vladimir Putin is expected to romp home, but will he be a real winner? You're watching Roundtable with me, David Foster. Rivals have either been banned or checked and approved. Mr. Putin is effectively unchallenged. So what will it all mean for the Russian people and the rest of us? Here's Dana Lewis.
On New Year's Eve 2000, as a Moscow correspondent for American TV, I was assigned to Red Square to cover Y2K, a computer virus that could cause havoc with everything from air traffic control to nuclear missile systems. But the surprise was Y2K was all hype, and the shocker of the night came just across Red Square, where Boris Yeltsin caught us all off guard. The first democratically elected president of Russia announced he was stepping down, and a little-known figure would replace him. Vladimir Putin would take the reins of power and is on course to hold them almost as long as Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. 18 years later, that little-known figure, a former KGB colonel, has become a powerful, some say disruptive force like few others. British Prime Minister Theresa May accusing Russia, led by Putin, of carrying out a nerve gas attack in Britain.
This action has happened against a backdrop of a well-established pattern of Russian state aggression.
There were 130 intercepts of Russian warplanes by NATO in 2017. Russia has been accused of backing far-right candidates in European elections, supporting a brutal leader in Syria, and in the US of hacking and influencing the American election results. And Putin ordered the invasion and annexation of Crimea and supported separatist fighting in Ukraine. In Europe, President Vladimir Putin represents the unpredictable. But in Russia, he is seen as someone who guarantees stability and keeps Russia on the world stage as a world power. Economic sanctions have hurt Russia, and there's likely to be more of those in the wake of the spy poisoning scandal here. But as unpopular as Putin has become in Europe, he's loved in Russia, and is soon to be given a new 6-year mandate to lead on.
The Russians at the moment see their country surrounded by NATO. The Russians see that the country is challenged, has many threats, and Putin is probably the only candidate that can deal with this situation.
Russia claims to be a democracy. Every 6 years, voters go to the polls and elect their president. That's what they will do March 18th. They will elect President Putin again. We can say that with certainty because no one credible has been allowed to run against him. Alexei Navalny, a popular political activist who has organized rallies against Putin, arrested and barred from politics. The only other well-known candidate is a former TV host, Ksenia Sobchak, popular with youth but not considered a real contender. Other candidates, like former Prime Minister Mikhail Kasyanov, has been threatened, embarrassed, and forced to quit politics out of fear and frustration. And he predicts Putin will threaten the Baltics next.
The Ukrainian issue is a testing one. If the West goes to compromise with Putin just on that, and somehow will trade by sovereignty of Ukraine, in this case we could expect and we should expect another points of tensions in Europe.
At Putin's one campaign rally, he promised, well, not much of anything, but also everything.
То ближайшие десятилетия, весь 21 век пройдет под знаком наших ярких побед. Мы сделаем это. Вместе мы. Команда. Мы команда, да?
Voter apathy is at an all-time low in Russia. The election race is so predictable that Kremlin's hope to achieve 70% support and 70% voter turnout is challenging. So ads with half-naked women are being distributed saying, "See you at the polling station," to get people more interested in the election that everyone knows will end with Putin as president. One more time, and at least until 2024.
Joining us from Moscow, we have Vyacheslav Matuzov, former Russian diplomat, also from Moscow, Dmitry Babich, a political analyst at Sputnik International News Agency. With me at the round table, we have Viktor Shebestein, who recently wrote a biography of Lenin and is a Russian affairs historian, and Anna Matvieva, a member of the Russia and Eurasia Security Research Group at King's College London. I'm going to ask Viktor a question, and all of you could perhaps remain silent if you agree with what he says. Who's going to win?
Vladimir Putin.
Okay. Anybody disagree with that? No, I think the answer is nobody disagrees with that. Therefore, what legitimacy will he have? If he's elected as leader of Russia, he's elected as leader of Russia.
Absolutely, he'll be recognised as the legitimate leader of Russia. That in itself does not, the president of Russia, that in itself does not make these elections entirely legitimate in a democratic sense. It's there were elections in the former Soviet Union every few years to the Supreme Soviet. They didn't necessarily add up as entirely legitimate elections. It's not democracy is not only about having sort of Potemkin elections every 5 years. There are no democratic
that being an allusion to something that was moved all the time, just to please the
yes, absolutely. They put up they put up fronts of villages to hide the rotting the rotting reality.
Let me ask Anna this one. Yes, okay, he will be president of Russia yet again, but legitimacy is about sort of being seen to do the right thing as well as doing what you believe to be the right thing. And in what sense is this democracy being served?
Legitimacy is in the eyes of the beholder. In terms of technical process, I'm sure they will have pretty clean elections and places where it is easy to forge elections, bend results, prisons, hospitals, military regiments. People most of the time would vote for Putin anyhow. So I don't see the need...
He's silenced the opposition, hasn't he? The main opposition leader has been arrested and re-arrested, banned from standing. There are a few candidates standing against him, but they are dressed up as opposition, aren't they?
Yes, Navalny has been banned from elections. That is true. That's not the only country which has managed to sideline uncomfortable figures. We can look at Moldova. 2 days before the elections.
Doesn't make it right, though, does it?
Yeah, but then we are not questioning the legitimacy of our Chinese president, who even doesn't pretend.
Well, let's talk about Russia here. I mean, it doesn't make it right if you've effectively pushed away any kind of real opposition.
But that's not true, David.
But what is real opposition?
Simply
what is real opposition?
Dimitri, okay, yes. I'll let you jump in at this particular point. Anna, will you get another chance in a second? Dimitri, what do you mean?
I mean that when Viktor says that this election can be compared to the elections to the Supreme Soviet in the times of the Soviet Union, well, I could not possibly imagine a person like Ksenia Sobchak running for the Supreme Soviet in the classical Soviet Union under Brezhnev.
Let me explain who she is. She is believed to be
I will explain you.
Okay, you go ahead.
She is a liberal candidate. She is the daughter of the former mayor of St. Petersburg, Anatoly Sobchak, a darling of Western press when he was alive, when he was very important in Russian politics. And she is even more radical on feminism issues, on Ukraine and on other things than even Hillary Clinton.
Dimitri, it all depends on who you read, because her father, to whom you refer, was a great friend of Vladimir Putin's. There are those who suggest she's been dressed up as an opposition figure and made to espouse these radical views simply to make it look like somebody's really standing up to it.
Was Putin's boss, but the main thing is that Ksenia Sobchak is a darling of the West. He travels to Washington, to European capitals. She has called for the return of Crimea to Ukraine. She is really presenting all the Western views, and any Russian citizen can vote for her during this election.
Well, let me ask Vladislav.
Rating, but also, David, you are simply in error when you say that Alexei Navalny is the main opposition candidate. His ratings are very low. They are lower than 10%.
Well, that's because he's not allowed to say very much, perhaps. Let me go to Vaishlav. Let me go to Vaishlav, because he's been sitting there very patiently. You hear Dmitry talk about the legitimacy of Ms. Sobchak as an opposition figure, the illegitimacy of Navalny. Is there any real opposition, in your opinion?
I agree with Dmitry fully and conditionally, because Sobchak is a person who was supported by Vladimir Putin before her candidacy. She met Vladimir Putin. He approved her candidacy. I think that Navalny is not the figure that bothered the Russians very much. This figure, Navalny, is bothered more and more outside Russia, in the West. That's right. They are considering him the main opposer. In Russia, picture absolutely different. We have a real rivalry today in our elections, because some plans, as I understand, were to push Ms. Sobchak, Mr. Zhirinovsky, and Zyuganov be as the candidates for presidency. And all the play was obvious. All forces were represented, even gender force.
Does any part of the process make the end result and the next few years for Russia any different?
Well, yes, it might. I mean, I think, who knows what's going to happen? It's very hard anywhere to predict what's going to happen next week, let alone in 5 years. It does not. I'd get back to the nature of this, not just this election, but the nature of what's happened in Russia. It's not a democratic society in the Western meaning of the term. However,
well, no, not everybody should bend to the laws of the West necessarily, should they?
No, absolutely not. But then don't call them democratic, and then argue that they're the same kind of elections as in the West. They're not. They are I say they are quite similar to there's a lot of similarity between Russia now in terms of civil society, in terms of democratic institutions, than the last years of the Soviet Union. And I would say that Andrei Sakharov was elected to the Supreme Soviet in the last years of the Soviet Union, who was as a kind of sop.
We're hearing Dmitry there,
but there's no.
raising his finger and smiling, so perhaps he agrees.
I want to make the main points that there's no there's no separation of powers in Russia. There's no independent judiciary. Okay. There's an excuse for a free media, an excuse for a free press. In Russia, there's been no advance in a normal idea of a fostered opposition.
How Russia has perhaps changed under Vladimir Putin, and Anna, I come to you on this.
Yeah.
We have to move on in the programme. So how has he changed Russia?
Putin has changed Russia in 3 main ways. First, he brought people security, and internal security has improved. There is also a
By that you mean a diminution of terrorist attacks, crime?
Banditry, crime, walking in the streets, sending your child to kindergarten.
Was the price people had to pay for that was to tolerate corruption?
Corruption also has decreased, but there is still perception of corruption. Yes, it is unacceptable. But we are talking about safety and security of many ordinary people, and also feeling more protected against what they perceive, and they have, I have to say...
So people are a bit happier. Yeah, that's number one.
People feel safer and secure in terms of being protected from internal and external threats. Secondly, more people started to live better. Well-being has improved. Russians started to travel. Everywhere you go in the world, there will be Russian tourists, and they will be ordinary people. They would not be oligarchs throwing money on prostitutes. And thirdly, social economic indicators are growing. Yes, they're growing from pretty low base, but there is better life expectancy, there is more health and education spending. This is something which people see as real improvements.
And the trains run on time.
Trains run on time. There is more infrastructure. Yeah, it doesn't solve all problems.
Okay, let me get to Vaishnav on this one. I think one of the points you made to my producer was that, yes, he's put up a strong foreign policy front for the last few years, but now he has to concentrate on domestic policy. Listening to Anna, it would seem that he's already gone some way to doing that. What's your view?
Well, I think that domestic problems is dominating today in Russian electorate. And that candidate who came to ordinary people with his program that defending needs of ordinary people, they will win. And all public opinion now shows that not only Putin is on the surface, but also Grudinin, because official public opinion measuring shows absolutely domination of Putin. But we have a non-official public opinion measure, and they showed about 80% of Russians support Grudinin, about 30%, 20% of Putin. And all other candidates are lost in all this struggle.
Can I ask Dmitry something, Vaishnav, if you don't mind?
Artificial. I think that results will be concentrated on two camps. Camp Grudinin, who unite all left opposition to Putin, and Putin, who is supported by other even
we will look out for those particular trends.
Like Zhirinovsky.
I'm going to ask Dmitry something. As a correspondent in Moscow, we see your work, but also as a Muscovite yourself and somebody who lives in the city and has lived under Vladimir Putin, do you personally feel better off since he became president, then prime minister, president again?
Well, in many ways, I agree with the previous speakers. Life certainly improved under Putin. But I would slightly disagree with Vyacheslav when he says that the election will be about domestic problems 100%. The pressure which has been applied to Russia by the United States and by the European Union has consolidated the Russian electorate in many ways. And I can tell you, for example, the whole story with the attempts to expel Russia from the Olympic Games. The West obviously wanted to make Putin less popular. Well, it had the opposite effect, because the people blamed the International Olympic Committee, the United States,
well, also
the UK.
A state-sponsored drugs program may have had something to do with it, Dmitry.
No, let me just finish. I will, because it's important. So whatever we can argue about this so-called doping program for a long time, whether it existed or not, but the net result was the rising popularity of Putin. Talking about what Victor said, I think it was important when he gave the example of Sakharov being elected to the Supreme Soviet under Gorbachev. Well, I can agree with Victor. Yes, Russia is a democratic country since the late 80s. And we have a much wider choice of candidates than, for example, Americans who had to make a choice between Mr. Trump and Hillary Clinton. Both of them.
I'm wondering, Dmitry, I just want to butt in here and play devil's advocate. The suggestion is that Vladimir Putin has demonized the West to increase his popularity and perhaps in doing so has brainwashed Russian citizens, perhaps yourself included, into thinking that he is the person who solved Russia's problems against the bigger world enemy.
Well, can I respond to that?
Of course.
Yes. Thank you very much for your appraisal of my brain and its ability to be washed. But I can tell you that, take the facts, when Russian athletes were not allowed to produce flags during the Olympic Games, when the viewers could not show flags and sing the Russian anthem, how do you think the Russian people perceived it? Of course, they perceived it as a sign of tremendous hostility from the West. And unfortunately, this hostility cannot be hidden. You know, when Russia is accused of what Prime Minister Theresa May called an act of terrorism hours after a British spy gets poisoned in one, that, of course, is perceived in Russia as a sign of hostility.
Okay, let me put this to Victor here. The point is being made that Vladimir Putin is the one person standing up to a bullying West that tries to humiliate Russia.
Well, again, there's a more complicated background.
Well, let's stick with the simplification
to this,
because we only have a little bit of time.
Well, he might very well be the. You know, he is, by his own lights, and probably why one of the reasons why he might win a thumping majority is that he has made Russia great again in the eyes, in the eyes of maybe of Russians.
And does it have to be the 70-70 that's been suggested? 70% turnout, 70% of that turnout voting for him.
Well,
anything less being.
I don't believe opinion polls here. You know, when they say there'll be no Brexit, or when they said Hillary Trump will win. I have no idea what opinion polls are.
Hillary Trump, now that's a frightening thought.
When they wouldn't win, rather. So I don't know about opinion polls in Russia.
These are commentators saying that unless he gets 70% of the 70% turnout, then it won't be a good result for him. Yes,
but I think it might, in the short term, for his domestic, for a thumping victory. Yes, making concentrating on the kind of nationalist program is without a doubt helpful. It does not. It is not going to help relations with the West,
which are pretty low at the moment. But he doesn't seem to care.
And the spying thing is an example of what
doesn't seem to care one little bit.
Yeah.
So what does he do next? Yeah. What does the opposition, if there is one, do next?
First, the West did what it could to create an image of powerful Putin. Russian government, Moscow, actually spent...
Well, surely him posing with his top off, you know, with fish and wrestling and diving into the ice, I mean, this was self-promotion as well. It's not the West.
Well, propaganda of healthy way of life for Russian men who normally do not spend their holiday being as active as Putin wanted to present a role model. Okay. Yes, it is something which was meant for domestic audience. People get out, do healthy sports, healthy pursuits, rather than lying on the beach and having a drink. So we should not be taking it as an image of power geared against the West.
What does he have to do next to maintain his popularity?
Putin is popular, whether we like him or not. Yeah? He is also a Russian leader who wants to enter Russian history with a capital letter. He wants to be remembered as the great leader which took the country in a reasonable, pitiful state, and he brought it somewhere at a new level.
Does he care?
Yes, his last term, and I believe it will be last term, that he needs to make his achievements sustainable, and he needs to prepare his successor so that his legacy, things which he believed, which he thought was his mission, actually lives and gets entrenched.
Okay, to Moscow for the last two thoughts. Vyacheslav, if I can ask you, does it really matter, or should we be thinking now about what comes after Putin?
Well, I think that Putin has absolutely popularity in Moscow, in Russia. But I can say that the most strong card in his hand is foreign policy. Because all Russians support his foreign policy vis-à-vis America, vis-à-vis Middle East and the Far East. All his foreign policy is supported by Russians. What is his weak point that he is suffering today? It is internal policy, his support of oligarchs, and their interference in political life in Russia, that worsening standard of life that Ksenia was talking about. Well, it is the result of exploiting Russian people. That's why Putin faces today a serious a serious opposition.
Okay, I do
real
have to jump in.
Not that of
I apologise for that, but I'm going to get to Dmitry before we end the programme. It's simply a matter of time. Yeah, comment on that. Keep it brief, if you would, and tell me what you think will happen after Putin.
Well, I think this election is important because I agree with Vyacheslav. There are many people who are going to vote for Grudinin in order to send a message to Putin that his policies have to be more leftist.
That's right.
So that's why this election is important. And it's very important what will happen after the election. Will Putin change his policy? Will he make it more social? Or is he going to stick with the monetarist, pro-Western liberal policies of the central bank, for example?
Okay.
So this is a big question.
We will have to see. We will have to see. I don't think anybody's in any doubt. Listen, thank you so much from Moscow. Sorry to have to jump in here and there, and apologies for referring to brainwashing. It wasn't directed particularly at you, Dmitry. Always nice to see you, and Vladislav, thank you too. There's no doubt that everybody we've interviewed on Roundtable today believes that Vladimir Putin is going to win the presidential election, that he will be president of Russia for yet another term. Likely, at the moment anyway, to be his last term in office. Law doesn't allow him to stand any longer, but we'll see about that. But Russia's certainly grabbing the headlines in so many different ways, from Sochi to Salisbury to Syria. And we will just have to wait and see. From me, David Foster, and the Roundtable team, thanks for joining us. Bye-bye for now.